When we talk about healing the mind, we're not simply referring to some abstract, poetic notion of inner peace. We're talking about something very real, something foundational. The mind, quite literally, is the starting point of every journey in your life. It is the filter through which you perceive the world, the generator of thought, emotion, and identity. If your mind is wounded, unclear, or fragmented, then your perception of reality will be too. And the problem is, most people don't even know they're carrying a fracture lens. You see, your mind is constantly creating narratives. It tells you who you are, who others are, what the world is, what's possible, what's hopeless. These stories become automatic. You don't consciously choose them. They're inherited, shaped by your earliest experiences, your environment, your culture, and especially by your pain. If you were neglected, before abandoned, betrayed, or misunderstood, your mind doesn't forget that. It adapts. It creates patterns of thought designed to protect you from further harm. But those same patterns, if left unexamined, can imprison you for life. Let me give you an example. A child who was never truly seen or validated may grow up constantly seeking approval from others. Their mind develops a belief. I am only valuable if others accept me. This isn't a conscious choice. It's survival. And as that child becomes an adult, that belief operates like a silent program in the background. They might build a career, a relationship, even a public image around that idea. But underneath, before line is still trying to resolve a wound that was never healed. This is why we say healing the mind isn't a luxury, it's a responsibility. Because an unhealed mind doesn't just affect your personal happiness, it affects the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every risk you avoid or pursue. The mind, if left in chaos, creates a life that mirrors that chaos. Philosophers from the Stoics to Carl Jung have pointed to this. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that. The things you think are just the way life is. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the way your mind is. And if that's true, then the power to change your life begins with the courage to confront your mind. But here's where most people falter. Confronting the mind is uncomfortable. It means facing not only the pain of your past, but also your complicity in continuing it. It means owning your patterns, not as shameful defects, but as clues. Like clues that tell you where you've been wounded, where you've adapted, and where you now have the power to heal. And yes, that power exists in every single one of us. Healing the mind requires two things: awareness and responsibility. Awareness is the ability to observe your thoughts and feelings without identifying with them. Responsibility is the willingness to change them. Deliberately, patiently, and persistently. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing not to be governed by the parts of you that were formed in fear. If you start here with the mind, you begin to understand that the life you're living right now is not a reflection of truth. It's a reflection of perception. And when perception is healed, when the internal narrative changes, the external world starts to respond in kind. That's not magic. That's psychology. That's philosophy. That's reality. You don't have to control the whole world to heal your life. You just have to reclaim the one thing that shapes every experience you'll ever have in your mind. And here's the truth you can't ignore. The quality of your mind becomes the quality of your life. Heal it and everything begins to change. We live in a culture that treats emotional pain as an inconvenience, something to be buried, minimized, or medicated away. We've been taught to fear vulnerability, to avoid discomfort, and to pathologize sadness as weakness. But here's the uncomfortable truth: if you want to heal your life, you have to be willing to feel the pain you've spent years trying to avoid. There is no transformation without confrontation. Emotional pain, grief, shame, heartbreak, regret deserves acknowledgement, not suppression. Let me be precise here. Pain is information. It tells you something about who you are, what matters to you, and where something inside you has been violated, neglected, or lost. And if you ignore that message, if you suppress it, you don't destroy the pain, you internalize it. It doesn't go away. It becomes resentment. It becomes depression. It becomes anxiety, addiction, rage, or numbness. You start acting it out without even realizing it. The mind stores what the heart refuses to process. Now, from a psychological perspective, this is called repression. The ego, your conscious self, pushes painful experiences out of awareness because they're too overwhelming to deal with. Before like, and that makes sense, especially in childhood when you don't have the tools to make sense of trauma or loss. But those repressed emotions don't disappear. Before like, they live in your unconscious, shaping how you react, how you relate, how you love or fear love. Carl Jung called this the shadow. The parts of yourself that you've disowned because they felt too dangerous, too painful, or too shameful to face. You have to understand, what you repress, you become enslaved to. If you never face the anger you buried as a child, it doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you passive, aggressive, or chronically resentful. If you never grieve a lost relationship, you may start sabotaging new ones to protect yourself from feeling abandoned again. The emotions you suppress become the architects of your suffering. And let me tell you something else. Your emotional pain is not random. It is specific. It is often tied to very early moments, pivotal relationships, formative wounds. These aren't just memories, they are psychological anchors. Until you revisit them, before like, not to relive the pain but to understand it, you remain a prisoner of the past. You start reacting to the present through the lens of unhealed wounds. But here's the redemptive parting. Before like, the act of acknowledging emotional pain is itself healing. The mind doesn't need you to be perfect, it needs you to be honest. Before like, when you allow yourself to feel sadness without distraction, to sit with your shame without judgment, you begin to integrate those fractured parts of yourself. You bring coherence to the self, and a coherent self is a powerful self. This is why journaling, therapy, deep conversations, even storytelling matter. They give form to the formless. They allow you to see patterns you didn't see before. You begin to realize that pain isn't the enemy. Daniel is. When you stop running from your pain, something remarkable happens. It stops chasing you. Now, this doesn't mean wallowing. Feeling pain is not the same as indulging in it. It's about processing it, learning from it, and letting it transform you. And that requires courage. But the alternative, emotional stagnation, is far more costly. A life lived in emotional suppression is a life lived in quiet despair. So the next time you feel that discomfort rising in your chest, don't silence it. Don't numb it. Ask it what it's trying to teach you. Because behind every wound is a lesson, and behind every lesson is an invitation. To grow, to heal, to become someone capable of living fully, not just surviving quietly. And here's the final thought, your pain is not the end of your story. It's the doorway to your transformation. Walk through it. Before like, love is one of the most powerful forces in human experience. It can elevate you to unimaginable heights of meaning, connection, and purpose. But it can also leave you devastated, wounded in ways that shape how you see yourself and how you move through the world. And this is the paradox. Before like, love can be both the wound and the remedy. Many people walk around today with unhealed love stories. They may not say it out loud, but something inside them still aches when they remember the person they lost, or worse, the person they never truly had. That ache isn't just emotional nostalgia, it's psychological residue. When love goes wrong, when it's cut short, betrayed, or never fully expressed, it leaves a trace. And that trace doesn't just disappear with time. It lingers in the mind, forming beliefs about worth, trust, intimacy, and vulnerability. From a psychological point of view, before like early love experiences, especially the first deep emotional connection, become templates. They shape your internal working model of how love operates. If that experience ended in confusion or rejection, you may unconsciously develop a belief that love is dangerous or that you're unworthy of being loved. And here's where it gets more complex. You will likely reenact those beliefs in future relationships, not because you want to suffer, but because the mind seeks familiarity, not happiness. It seeks what it understands, even if that understanding is rooted in pain. This is why revisiting your personal love story is not just a sentimental exercise. Before like, it's a necessary confrontation with the beliefs you've built around human connection. The way you remember that first love. What you made it mean. Before like, how you integrated the loss or the longing. Those things matter. They influence whether you open your heart again or build walls around it. They determine whether you pursue connection or avoid it out of fear. And it isn't just about romance. It's about how love as a force interacts with your psychology. Before like, love has the potential to rewire the brain. Functional MRI scans show that emotional closeness lights up the same neural pathways as physical safety. We are biologically wired to need connection. So when love fails us, it's not just emotional, it's existential. It shakes the foundations of who we are before like. But here's the transformative part. The same love that wounds us also offers the blueprint for healing. When you examine your pain through the lens of compassion, when you reframe your loss as a lesson instead of a failure, something shifts. You stop seeing love as a danger to be avoided and start seeing it as a force to be approached wisely. You realize that it wasn't the love itself that hurt you. It was the fear, the miscommunication, the expectations, the unresolved wounds you brought into it. And now you have the power to do it differently. Healing the mind requires revisiting those early chapters, not to dwell, but to understand. Not to revive the past, but to reclaim your agency in the present. Because every time you heal a part of yourself that was shaped by a broken love, you make space for a deeper, truer love to emerge, both toward others and toward yourself. And let's be honest, many people are afraid to love again, not because they don't believe in love before like, but because they haven't healed from the first time it broke them. But if you let that fear run your life, then the wound wins. Then pain becomes the author of your future. You cannot live fully if you fear the very thing that makes life meaningful. Love will always involve risk, but a life without it is guaranteed suffering. A slow erosion of the soul. Before like, you heal your mind not by avoiding love, but by learning how to love with wisdom, courage, and open eyes. So here's the insight to sit within. Before like, the love that once hurt you can also be the path that heals you. But only if you're willing to face it, understand it, and let it grow you. Before like, forgiveness is one of those words that people throw around a lot, especially in self-help circles. But very few actually understand what it really means, let alone how to practice it in a way that leads to genuine healing. We often think of forgiveness as something we do for others. Some kind of moral charity, a noble act of letting someone off the hook. But that's a shallow view. True forgiveness is not about letting others off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the psychological burden of resentment. It's a radical act of mental liberation. You see, when someone wrongs you, whether it's betrayal, neglect, humiliation, or abandonment, it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It plants something inside your psyche. If that injury is not processed and resolved, it festers. Before like, you start carrying it with you like a weight, often unconsciously. And over time, that weight distorts your emotional world. It turns into bitterness, into mistrust, into chronic anger or passive despair. You might say you've moved on, but neurologically and emotionally, the experience still lives inside you. From a psychological perspective, before like, unforgiveness is a form of self-imprisonment. You become tethered to the event, to the person, to the identity of the one who was hurt. That identity can be seductive. It makes you feel morally superior, justified in your pain. But it also keeps you trapped in the past. Before like, you remain reactive, not free. Jung would argue that in clinging to resentment, you feed your shadow. Before like, the darker parts of you grow stronger because they are fueled by an unresolved emotional charge. And here's something most people don't realizing. Forgiveness is not always about reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still choose to never see them again. You can forgive a partner, a friend, before like, without condoning what they did or minimizing the damage. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wound, it transforms your relationship to it. It gives you sovereignty over your own mental and emotional space. One of the most important aspects of forgiveness is recognizing that it often has very little to do with the other person. It's an internal process. The other person doesn't even need to apologize. In fact, many never will. But if your healing depends on their remorse, you've given them control over your future. That's not strength. That's emotional dependency disguised as justice. Let's be clear, easy. Forgiveness, especially in cases of deep betrayal, requires tremendous strength. It means confronting your pain, not bypassing it. It means grieving what was lost and accepting what will never be repaired. And most importantly, it means taking back responsibility. Not for what happened to you, but for how you carry it forward. This is not weakness. It's the highest form of psychological maturity. To forgive is to say, this pain no longer gets to define me. And that declaration is what creates space in the mind for something new. New love, new clarity, new possibility. Before like, you stop being a prisoner of the past and become an architect of the future. And perhaps most radically, forgiveness must also be extended inward. Many people can't move forward because they haven't forgiven themselves, for staying too long, for missing the signs, for not being stronger, for being vulnerable. But healing doesn't come from self-condemnation. It comes from self-compassion. It comes from recognizing that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. That doesn't mean excusing everything. It means understanding it so you can outgrow it. So let's stop thinking of forgiveness as a gift you give someone else. It's not. Before, it's a key. And that key doesn't unlock their freedom. It unlocks yours. Here's what it comes down to. You can carry the weight of what hurt you before, or you can choose to set it down and walk forward. But you can't do both. One of the greatest illusions modern people live under is the idea that they can think their way into healing. That if they just read enough, analyze enough, before intellectualize enough, they'll eventually sort everything out. And while insight is important, healing is not purely a cognitive process. It's embodied. Before, it requires more than knowing. It requires living differently. This is where discipline comes in, not as punishment, but as structure. A mind in chaos cannot heal in an environment of chaos. It needs order, needs rhythm. It needs practices that reinforce clarity, strength, and stability over time. Now, when I say discipline, I don't mean rigid control or obsessive perfectionism. I mean a commitment to daily habits that align your life with your values and with reality. The truth is, your nervous system doesn't respond to occasional breakthroughs. It responds to repetition, to patterns. Your brain changes through what's called neuroplasticity, repeated behaviors, thoughts, and choices that create new neural pathways. That means if you're serious about healing your life, you need to take responsibility, not just for what you feel, but for what you do consistently. The philosopher Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that applies to mental health just as much as anything else. If you want a stronger mind, you need stronger patterns. If you want inner peace, you have to stop practicing chaos. That's why daily rituals, journaling, exercise, meditation, prayer, meaningful conversation are not luxuries. They're essential. They anchor the self. They create psychological predictability in a world that constantly pulls your attention in 1,000 directions. The problem is people underestimate the cost of not having structure. They tell themselves, "I'll get to it when I feel better." But that's not how the psyche works. You don't wait to feel motivated to act. You act, and the action creates the motivation. Discipline precedes emotional clarity, not the other way around. Let's take a simple example: sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired. It distorts your cognition, inflames your emotions, weakens your immune system, and amplifies anxiety. You can't talk your way out of that. You need discipline. You need a bedtime, a wind-down routine, a reason to respect your biology. The same applies to food, to movement, before to screen time. These are not minor details. They are the architecture of your daily reality. If you build your days with care, your mind becomes a safer place to live in. But here's the deeper truth. Discipline is also spiritual. It is a declaration of what you believe you're worth. Because no one creates structure for something they don't value. Before, if you believe you are worthy of healing, worthy of peace, then your calendar should reflect that belief. If it doesn't, you're lying to yourself. Before, healing isn't about waiting for someone to rescue you. It's about showing up for yourself every day with integrity, whether you feel like it or not. Before, and that's another thing. Feelings are not always reliable indicators of truth. Just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean you are. Just as because you feel broken doesn't mean you can't function. Discipline allows you to act from principle, not just emotion. It creates a stable floor from which deeper healing can emerge. So, no, this isn't glamorous work. It's not always profound or poetic. Sometimes it's just doing the right thing again and again, quietly, even when no one sees. But that's how you reclaim your power. That's how you tell your mind, before, we're building something better now. And here's the challenge I leave you with if you want to change your life. Start by mastering your day, because healing isn't found in the extraordinary, it's built in the ordinary, repeated with devotion. There comes a point in every journey of healing where you must stop looking backward and start looking forward. Not out of denial, but out of necessity. Before, you cannot create a meaningful life if your entire focus is on the wound. There is a time for understanding your pain, a time for grieving it, a time for integrating it. But then there must come a time when you make a decision to live from purpose rather than from trauma. That's where the real transformation begins. Too many people get caught in what we might call a psychological loop, cycle of endless self-examination, perpetual processing, and emotional recycling. And while introspection is important, it becomes counterproductive when it lacks a destination. Healing is not the goal, it is the foundation from which you pursue your real goal.